Good morning. Good morning. It is Make It Happen Monday. And for those that don't know you, I'm Cheryl Andrews. I'm also known as the Listening Detective, and I'm your host this week. And we are following a series this time where we're talking about the pushing yourself out the comfort zone and when pushing works and when pushing doesn't. And today, as always, not always, this week I have got a guest. It is the wonderful Dave Drimmy. We have had some technical issues, so you're going to get his glorious Scottish accent shortly and a photograph of him, but we just can't get the video working in the technical time that we had to try and set things up. So we are now experiencing that thing where you have to push through, even though things are not quite as you'd like. But without further ado, I want to tell you a little bit how I met David. David and I met in 2016. I'm very pleased to say that we've become good friends and supporters of each other. And the theme today, who supports the supporter? We met, I was actually on holiday, and something he said in a LinkedIn post meant that I actually decided I'd work when I was on holiday because this gorgeous soul was reaching out, and I just couldn't resist the opportunity to talk to him. And from there, as the story goes, the rest is history. So without any further ado, let me bring Dave Drimmy in, and he can tell you what is happening in his world, what he's making happen. So good morning, Dave. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Listen, thank you so much, and apologies about the technical issues. It must be something about Hadrian's Wall or something like that. I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
I have no idea, but fortunately, we did work out how to get you to upload a photograph so people can see your gorgeous smile and have a little bit of a sense of your presence here. But because we were having technical difficulties, we've literally had 5 seconds preparation before I've gone live. So we'll do a little bit of what I call the clean setup together, and everybody else can hear us, because the thing about being outside your comfort zone is often it's about actually being clear what you want to have happen. So just to give you an overview, Dave, we're going to be talking about what you're making happen right now. I can see you've got Profit Champions there. I also know that you've got your great your podcast Wealth Wednesday, which I've been very privileged to be a guest on. So I'd love to know a bit more about what you're making happen. But I also want to interview and ask questions about this. I've heard clients use the word push. You've got to push yourself to do something when it's a bit uncomfortable or outside your comfort zone. And I'm just curious about your take on push for you, like what when it works, but also when this pushing doesn't work, just your experience. So does that work for you?
Absolutely fantastic. And I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here. So thank you very much. And I love your hat, by the way. It's fabulous.
I'm very much happier with this one. It is a bit of a classic example, isn't it? Everything, life's a progress. The detective hat, those who know me, I used to wear a Sherlock Holmes hat. And it's because when I came up with the detective brand, Sherlock Holmes was the only detective I could think of. And then I realized that I didn't really want to wear a man's hat. I wanted to wear a girly one, and I like bright colors. So it's taken 5 years to let go of the old hat. But yes, I've evolved into the detective trilby, and I'm very excited, except for the little design flaw. Of course, I get a bit lost on the green screen. I have to remember to.
It's still fabulous.
That's why I have a white screen, just in case anyone thinks they've lost me. I can just move over. So thank you for the compliment. I'm very, very grateful for the support I actually got from Lisa Newport, talking about supporters supporting supporters. Lisa Newport's been a style coach working with me over the last sort of 18 months, saying I really wanted to keep the identity of that detective, but I wanted to brighten myself up, get back to who I felt was the true me. So that's been gorgeous. So tell us, know more about me, David. What are you making happen? What's happening in your world right now?
Well, it's fascinating time, actually. And I have right now in the middle of refurbishing a farmhouse in the Scottish borders, which we've been working on. And we've got 250-meter boreholes, and we've got ground source heating, and we're trying to go literally off grid as much as possible. In fact, looking at a wind turbine so we can get all our electric, actually invest in a wind turbine to get our electric paid for. So lots of things happening on the personal front. And on the business front, talking about evolution, I spent 20 years, as you know, in the construction business as a quantity surveyor. Woke up one day as a chief quantity surveyor working 90 hours a week for literally, at the time, it was under 30 grand a year. And this was 25 years ago. And just thought, well, it's time for change, literally time for change. And I was fortunate in that my beautiful wife got a new job, so that could support us and I could take a risk. And literally life is about taking risks. I mean, you mentioned being in Australia when we actually met, and you took a risk and you went traveling and you just had an amazing time there. I know that. But from there, basically, I started a business not knowing anything about sales and marketing because I was construction focused.
Yeah.
So made lots and lots of errors, but I had some successes, and that gave me an opportunity to grow a million plus business, and then promptly ignored the advice from mentors who had experience in my space and lost it all. So it's often in the moments of mistakes and errors that you learn most. And absolutely, I learned that because I end up going to work in doing like a night porter job for several weeks just to get some cash coming in the door. And there, after I cleaned everything up, I found an advert which led to a 50 grand a year job. So sometimes you've got to go places to get to other places. And it's quite fascinating because that led me into a business development function, helped the company grow from 6 to 15 million from August 2008 in the middle of a recession, and then moved into consulting and now into business coaching, specifically in construction companies. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah. And I've been very privileged and honored to be able to share that with you over the last sort of, wow, it's 6 years now, isn't it? 6 years since we met. It'll be 6 years at the end of this year. I'm perhaps time traveling towards October already, as it was October. So tell us a little bit more about Profit Champions then, and what it is that you're doing, and how the Wealth Wednesday podcast fits with all that.
Well, it's fascinating, actually. The Profit Champions, I had been doing consulting for 5 or 6 years, and a lot of the time clients paid for my assistance but didn't implement, and that really frustrated me because I played rugby at a high level, I played basketball at a high level, my first dan karate, so it's all about incremental increases. So I've always been coaching for years and years and years. So COVID hit, lost 5 out of 6 clients, and made a pivot like so many other people at the time. And I just thought to myself, what do I want to do, and how can I impact others? And for me, it was about coaching them to success, but it was a coach and consult model. But where I went was into the construction sector, which I knew very, very well, and really just guiding people, because so many people nowadays, Cheryl, they are doing the same old they've been doing for 20 years. And guess what? They're still getting the same results. They're existing on cash flow, but profit is something that would be nice to have, but they don't seem to be able to make it. And it's because they don't know how. A lot of the guys I deal with are craftsmen and freely admit they've never been taught how to run a business. So that was the business coaching side of things.
And so in terms of that, because you and I talked about, because I've supported you and you've supported me, and with the theme being today, the sort of supporter needs support, doesn't it? So I know when we spoke before about the construction business, they're also needing a team then, aren't they? They have to build a team. They got to get that support network in place for themselves in order to be the craftsman, in order to develop the business as a whole. So tell me a bit more about sort of what you're doing. What support are you providing them in order to support themselves through those transitions and changes?
Absolutely superb question. Thank you very much for that, because you and I both being supporters, that's our default position. We want to encourage people and help people to move to their highest level. And right now, there are 3 major challenges I come across all the time. And that is quite literally, it's cash flow is number 1. Number 2 is hiring the right people. There seems to be a dearth of great people in the industry, in most industries, I hasten to add. And then work-life balance. So those are the 3 challenges that I come across. And for example, work-life balance, unless you've got the right team in place who have defined roles, you're never going to be able to extricate yourself out of the day-to-day running of the business to focus on designing the business. And for me, we've got a simple system to help companies acquire 5-star employees. And by 5-star employees, they get involved, they get passionate about being involved in the business. And whether it's a painting business or whatever other kind of business, it doesn't matter. They get passionate about being involved. And but we have to go all the way back to what are the core values of the owner.
Yeah.
Because you attract who you are, whether that be the clients who are external clients or your internal clients who are your employees and colleagues. So when we help a client get started, we go all the way back into what are your core values? What do you value in life? And then we go out and we've got a 5-step recruitment process, which begins with a 15-minute short telephone interview. And then the first major interview is a core values interview. And then we go into a skill set interview. So in that order, we define who we're looking for up front. And what's happening now, Cheryl, is the clients I'm working with are actually attracting really good people to work with them because they are looking for the right people. It's not bums on seats, which is a phrase many people use. It's literally attracting their employees.
It's so important, isn't it? Because I think when it's like I'm often helping people get the right support, and it's very easy sometimes to go to just to get any support because you're in that fight or freeze, you're fighting fires, you need something, and that's where having sometimes a coach, a mentor, it can help settle your state so you can slow the process down and be a bit more methodic about the decisions you're making in order to get the right support in right places. Now, I understand from a brief conversation we had on LinkedIn, actually, that you have a program coming up. Is it an actual a fixed event, and you've got dates for it? Have you got a link to it? Something we would have done if we had a little bit of time without our technical disasters this morning. But if you have got the link to the event, please pop it into if you can do it on the comments box on here, please do. If not, send it to me in the private chat and I can put it up while we're chatting in a moment so that people can find out more about this 5 steps for recruiting. Because when you've got people like you that have done it before time and time again, it's always nice sometimes to have a model to work through in order to just to settle the state, to go, actually, we do need to invest the time here at that value stage very, very early on.
Well, I thank you very much, first and foremost. So we don't have a fixed date for it, but I'll certainly get some links to you. And it's going to be a 3-hour workshop, and it's going to cost £30, and every penny is going to Ukraine because I just want to do as much as possible to raise funds for some of the injustices that are going on over there. Like so many other people, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
So the workshop literally is going to really open people's minds into a different way of thinking, and I'll be delighted to actually help with that. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and it's really great to hear that there's some support going out there for the Ukrainians. And I know that for me personally, and some of my colleagues and people that I work alongside, it's really important to and I would just need to add it in just for my own personal values. This bit is that we're also supporting some people in Russia, because this national thing, that's the government side of it, but there's human beings on both sides of this war that are human, that have got their properties, their buildings, their families, the people that they're trying to sustain. And so it's also supporting both sides of the individuals in this system that are their lives are being destroyed right now by this whole thing that's happening. So it really does bring joy to my heart to know that you're putting some attention on there and getting some help out to the refugees. And I think between us, we can all support all of those individuals, because it's not, in my opinion, Russians generally, because it's about that's a political thing, isn't it? That's above there on the national level, but there's human beings in amongst this whole thing that are being devastated by some of these decisions that are being made that's so much out of their control.
I couldn't agree more, Cheryl. And I think we live in an ecosystem, and if we go back to the supporters and the other elements of people that are actually out there, we feel comfortable when we are surrounded by people that are like us. And there are some amazing people in this world, and I'm fortunate enough to have traveled widely and met some fabulous, fabulous people, and to be on the show as well, and hopefully impacting and sharing a few ideas with people on your show, which is amazing. It takes me back into the Wealthy Wednesday podcast, because on my journey through life, I'm 57 now, going into 58 this year. And the reason I started the Wealthy Wednesday podcast, of which you were an amazing guest, actually, and just fantastic. I've had so many wonderful comments about when you joined the show. But the reason I started was, it was twofold. One, it was to push me to grow by sharing and learning and sharing, but also to impact people. It's not about becoming a multimillionaire, albeit you can be if you want to be. It's about learning some simple steps, and we start off gently, and we're talking about mindset, we're talking about people that we work with, and we're now migrating more into, business building and choosing an area of expertise, whether it be property or whatever other area of wealth. But wealth can be health, it can be mental health, it can be whatever you want it to be. So it's about bringing a few amazing people together and impacting. And I put the last show out last Wednesday, and 1 hour later, I had a phone call from somebody asking me for some advice.
Yeah.
And it was a personal friend, and it was joyful because I was able to steer that individual in a direction where he hadn't originally thought. And to be able to do that is delicious. And I know this show is phenomenal because hopefully it will guide people in the direction that you're hoping to steer people.
And I guess that's the thing, isn't it? I think there is, I talk on another one of the programs I run, it's called Motivate, Manage or Mentor. And I think that when we are stuck and we need support, sometimes we do need a motivator. We need that cheerleader, that person who absolutely knows what we're aiming for, why we're doing it. And they're going to be encouraging us, and they're going to be going, keep going. I mean, it's like the marathon runner who's, that last mile, and they're in absolute agony, they're in snotty heap, and they look like they're crumpled. You need the person that's going to go, keep going, you're so close, not someone that's going to go, oh, you look like you're in pain, sit down. Because Absolutely. when you are outside your comfort zone, you need those things. I think sometimes you need those people that are going to help you manage your own state, which is more about listening to you and helping you understand your own system. And that's where the clean language and the work that I do that's where the body of my work is in that area, because it's about, actually, we can't engage with other people. We can't ask for our needs to be met if we don't know what they are. If you haven't had the opportunity to listen to and get to know your own system, then you're going to find it harder to even articulate what your core values are, what's important about them. So that whole process doesn't work if you don't know how to listen to and manage your own internal system, your own internal team effect, those inner voices, sensations, emotions that we're blessed with as human beings. And the last bit is the mentoring. There is going to be times when we don't know. We know that we don't know. That you could be asked as many questions as you like, and people could listen patiently and kindly, and they could go, come on, you could do it. Yeah, you can do it. But if you don't know what to do, you're not going to do anything. And that's when we need to have the mentoring. And that's where I know that you use the term coach mentor, is because you've got experience in that. You've been through the process. You've got some systems. You've got some ideas and models that people can try on for size. And I also know that you're accommodating in that, there's not one size fits all. There's always going to be little tweaks or development, just like, I guess, with your property and your barn, where you kind of know what you want to have, but you can't always have what you want, can you? You have to tweak things slightly for those models to fit each individual. And I think it's so important that you said about the, you will get people that are like you core values wise, but for a team to really work, you're going to have people also to some extent that might annoy you because they work very differently to you. So you might be big picture and they might be detail. They might be systems orientated, whereas you might be people orientated. But if you've got the core values that hold you together at the beginning, in the middle, the purpose for doing it, and you know why you're doing it, and you've got the skills to listen without judgment to each other, then magic happens. That is when, for me, that's when the magic happens, because it's the differences that help us grow. Which reminds me, I'm really aware of the time, and you just mentioned about, you did the podcast, you had to really sort of push yourself to do that, and that's what brings us on to our word for today. So when you've had to push yourself to do your podcast, that push is like what? I've
got a wonderful gentleman I met who he meets me every week, and he does all the tech for my podcast. He's great. So I pay him. It's a fractional fee, and I pay him for what he does in pulling it all together. So because I meet him on a weekly basis, just as I meet my clients on a weekly basis, what actually happens is that pushes me to have prepared the podcast in advance of our meeting. So we can then critique it, we can talk, and we can explore how we can help that be shared more. And so that pushes me to a huge extent. And we figure out what the topics are going to be, not just for 1 week in advance, but 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance, but they can change. Nothing is set in stone. So every week it can be completely different. And I absolutely love it for that reason.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about pushing. I want to share with you a little story, because I met a couple of gentlemen about 6-7 weeks ago, and 6 years ago, they left their two brothers, actually, they left their jobs on 80,000 a year to start a business in the construction sector. And 6 years later, one of the brothers is up at 4 a.m. in the morning, doing all the paperwork and business stuff before he goes on site at 8 o'clock. He then comes back in at 6 o'clock from site and works till 8 o'clock and goes home. Now, these guys are earning £600 a week, and they were in huge pain, but it was a delicate situation. So I had to help them unlock themselves, for free, by the way, unlock themselves to find a way out of that pain. 6 weeks later, we met on Saturday, and they said, David, can you help us, please? Can you help us grow our business? Can you help us get back to where we were? Can you help us get our lives back? So I think that's almost more positive in terms of pushing, because we have to reach down and give people a hand to say, do you want to come out of the hole you're in?
Yeah. And so can I pause you? Can I pause you and just ask a little bit more detail? Because you've got the pushing, where you're getting up at 4 a.m., you're going to do your work, and you're coming home and doing more stuff again in the evening, and they're in a lot of pain. And you've got this other push that you're doing personally that's working for you, because you've got your podcast producer, you're meeting with them weekly, and you're pushing you to that. I don't know if you use the word motivate, I might be inserting that, but that motivates you to get it ready for the meeting, for a discussion. And I'd love to talk about both of those separately, and just first of all focus on the one that, so when it's working for you personally in this podcast. So when you're pushing to get ready for that meeting for your podcast, I can't remember what to call him now, the person that's helping you with the podcast, what kind of push is that push when you're pushing to get ready for the meeting?
Great question, actually, and thanks for asking that, because it's an internal push. It's an internal push to provide huge value. So for me, it's about what's been happening recently. How can I share maybe a tidbit from maybe a client meeting or somebody I've met that can impact somebody? And literally, it's looking for the gem in amongst so many of the distractions that are in our world today. And it's about providing one gem or one story so that I can really help even one person to change their direction 1 degree. And having guests on the show also brings in a different dynamic. But in general, the show is about just sharing those nuggets that people can pick up from and take and choose. And some people will take a nugget from it. And like this gentleman that reached out to me literally last week, an hour after the show, other people will take it and go, I want more. And for me, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And so for you, it's an internal push, and it's about being able to share a gem or a nugget that's going to help somebody change just 1 degree in direction. And when it's an internal push, just go with this question. It might be a bit weird. Where is that internal push?
What a fabulous question. As a supporter, my desire is to help as many people as I possibly can. It's to create some impact in the world and to allow people possibly to learn from the mistakes I've made in the past. So I traveled to Machu Picchu pre-COVID with my family. It'd been on a list of my utmost places to travel for years, and we made a decision to travel there. The experience we had was phenomenal thanks to a guide. So we literally trekked in over 4 days, came up through the sun gate just as the sun was rising, and there was this spiritual moment where you could just see Machu Picchu. It was just phenomenal. And I will never lose that. And my family were with me, and my kids were 17 and my twins were 17. So for me, it's a bit like that. If I can help, if I can bring some goodness from inside and share it outside to allow people to be able to see something different in the world, something different in their lives or in their business, that's my push.
And so your push is internal, and it's a desire, and it's a bit like your trip to Machu Picchu, where you've got those memories, and you can, the thought that you better help other people to see those things differently. And when there's a desire and a push and it's internal, does it have a shape or size, that push, when it's internal like that?
Does it have a what, sorry?
A shape or size.
Wow. Does it have a shape or a size? I don't think it doesn't have a shape or a size because it's heartfelt. So it's not tangible. It genuinely is a wish to. That's such a good question. For me, it's a genuine wish to share the goodness. It's like spread love to people. If you are able to spread love to people, you can change the world.
So it's heartfelt.
Absolutely.
And a genuine wish to share love with the world. And so thank you. I'd love to, I don't know about anybody else of you, if you've got questions for David, we're on LinkedIn Live, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. Please ask your questions, and I can always tag David if he doesn't see them. So if you want to know more about that heartfelt desire to spread the love in the world, I know that I would love to be spending a 90-minute session helping know more about that. But I want to go to the other side now, because that's the push that's, it's heartfelt, it's internal, and it's a desire to help other people to have this one change in direction, if it's going to make 1 degree of change in direction, and to give them that, like that Machu Picchu memory, that experience. And that's your push, that's when it's internal. And I know you've got the story about your clients that have contacted you and they were obviously in pain. Do you have a personal story for yourself when pushing hasn't worked, or push that kind of push that doesn't work for you? And if not, we'll go to the clients.
I do actually. No, it's a very valid point, because, and I think that's why I am so passionate about being a guide for people, because when I changed careers, I said earlier on, I got involved in a couple of projects where there were people, and it was sales and marketing, and I had some, I'll call them loosely mentors, but they were sales guys who told me that there was a certain way to do things, and it was about pressure sales, and it was about conversion, and it was horrible. But at the time, I had no other benchmarks, and I just went, well, okay, that's okay. That must be the way it's done. And I felt icky inside, but I did it, and I got results because there was a process to follow. But I still felt sick. And there's this internal GPS, which I think guides us all into what's right and what's wrong. And for me, I did not enjoy that experience, and it's still, in some ways, I still think back on that time today, because it impacted a lot of what I did over the future years. So pushing in the wrong direction, for me, that was tangible. That was not a nice experience. However, with every dark side, you can learn from it, and you can understand the beautiful elements. And that's why I push so strongly to guide people and help people move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so there's this push, and there's these salespeople, and you didn't know any better, and there was a process, and you did get results, but you had this icky feeling. And is there anything else about that icky feeling when you're pushing like that?
I grew up in my grandparents and my parents had certain core values, which were they were basically from the early part of the century. It was just very honourable, and so I was contravening those core values, I think, if I go deeply into it, and thus I was doing something. It's like going off a main road into a jungle and getting scratched, and there's snakes and there's horrible beasts and stuff like that. That's where I found myself, and it just didn't feel right. If I'm painting a picture here, I hope I am, because that was not nice. And if people go there, know that there are people that can guide you in the direction that you want to go, and to stay true to your core values. And thankfully, on my journey, I met other people, and I've got a vast library, and I met yourself and other people who are guiding me to do the right thing for the right people. So I had to go into that dark place to appreciate the better place, if that makes sense.
And so that icky feeling, though, is to do with actually being, the core values that have come from, I think you said your grandparents or your parents, and it's that thing about honouring or honourable. And so when you've got that icky feeling, where is the icky feeling? When you know that it's, I'm making this word up, you didn't say this, but it's not aligned with your core values. Where is the icky feeling?
In karate, there is a point just below your rib cage, and it's something called kime. It's a feeling. Wherever you throw a punch or you do a kick, it basically is. It's a feeling. It's a feeling of strength, and the ickiness was kind of above that. It was in the chest. It was almost like toxicity. But as I say, that's only looking back on it now. At the time, I knew no different, because I was surrounding myself with people who I was there to learn from. I'm a learner bear. That's me. My strengths finder. I'm a maximizer. I take something from good to being great. And I was looking for guidance. It just happened to be the wrong guidance. So the ickiness was very much in the chest, but it was also probably in my mind going, surely this can't be right. This isn't the way I
Yeah. So you didn't know any better then. It's only now on reflection that you can see that, and it was in your chest and it was in your mind. And I guess that's why we know our work's synergistic, isn't it? Is that when you know yourself well and you know your core values, then when you get those, you'll be more aware of those feelings, and you'll get a better sense of whether that feeling of it not being right is simply because it's a change and it's a bit uncomfortable and it's not familiar yet, or it's not aligned with who you are and what works for you from a core value place, but also just how you operate in the world, what works for you best. So given that, and you said it's about, there's every dark side, there's my memory seems to be going today, but there's lessons learned. I guess it's because I've got my own model of this at the moment. So what did that period of time with that ickiness that you're now reflecting, what have you learned from that? What do you do different as a result of knowing that now?
A great exercise I do with friends, acquaintance, family, whatever it might be, is to get a piece of A4 paper out and put a line down the middle, and at the top, left-hand side, put positive, as in plus, and then on the right-hand side, put negative. And I start by helping people, and I've done this myself, write down all the negatives. Absolutely all the negatives you can think about a situation. So it's an outpouring of all the negative stuff. And then opposite that, literally write the opposite. So of all the negatives that are there, what's the opposite? Because that's really, truly what we want. So I think from going through the dark side, which it wasn't dark side, but it was experiences which shaped me. I now know what's on the left-hand column. I know what is right and what I should be doing and serving people. And that includes even, I had another client, not a client, a lady who was running a business that's grown from 57 to 235 to 600,000 in 3 years through COVID, by the way. And but she had major issues in her business, and I could clearly see how I could help her shape the business so she could remove herself out of the day-to-day business and spend her time on designing the business. But she sent me an email 2 days later, well, actually just a day before we were going to meet for a strategy call, which is 90% value to the client, by the way, and 10% I just kind of give a bit of a pitch on what I do. But she sent me an email. I've got 2 other mentors, and basically, I don't need your help, David. And I went, but you're trying to introduce your son into the business. He needs guidance, and we freely discussed this, and these other people haven't even raised that with you. So that frustrates me as well, because I can clearly see a pathway, but I just have to accept that's life. And I sent a lovely message and said, listen, I'm here. If you ever want to just bounce some ideas or whatever, I'm here to help you, because that timing for that person isn't right now.
Yeah.
And maybe 6 months.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a lovely place to almost bring our interview to a close, because I was just having this conversation with somebody yesterday. Once you have been through a process and you get familiar with it, what's needed to recruit, or what's needed to grow a business, or what's needed to listen to yourself, in my case, whatever our thing is that we're particularly passionate about and we're familiar with because we've become curious about it over years and time. I think it's so important to remember the time it took for us to do the journey, because we can often want to speed it up for other people. And often people do come to us because they want it to be faster, and that's great. But when they're not ready for it, they're not ready for it. And people just won't learn the lesson until the time is right for them. But it's letting them know where the signposts are, isn't it? It's letting people go, well, I'm here, and when you're ready, this is the options that we can do to support you. So I want to thank you, Dave, because I know that we're very different from that, because I probably cannot visualize the way. I don't even have the way forward for my clients, except for that I know, actually that's not true. I do know if people are losing confidence and they're finding it difficult to communicate with other people, there are particularly core models you can get curious about. And even though I know that, like yourself, if that's not where their attention is right now, I have to meet them where their attention is and listen and work out what they'd like to have happen next, and trust that their system knows what they need for now. And just because I think it's this, what I've learned over the years is the gap between what is an easy step for me, because I've got familiar with it and I've done it, is often a massive chasm for other people, and they need bridges or stepping stones or something to get from where they are now to where I think they can be, or they might want to be. So is there any final words you'd like to share when it comes to supporters having support, and push the stuff that works or stuff that doesn't, before we close today's show?
I think right now, Cheryl, you do such an amazing job in helping and guiding people. And I think you do it so well, as in literally you can ask questions like, what's on your mind and what else? What's the real challenge here for you? What do you want? How can I help? Those simple questions. There are so many people coming out of this horrific period of time with the pandemic. Minds have shifted. There's a statistic I saw just a couple of weeks ago that 59% of people are leaving current jobs to look for jobs where the company has the same core values as themselves, but they're using money as the excuse. So if we take that a step further, if we can help people define their core values, what's important in their life, and thus their objectives of where they actually want to go. If they want to travel to Machu Picchu, what do we have to do? We've got to decide the dates, how we're going to get there, etc. in life, Cheryl, what I know is you guide people, because in your role as the listening detective, you are helping people like myself uncover more about myself and ourselves. And thus, in doing so, that is incredibly powerful. So keep doing what you're doing, because you do such a phenomenal job. And you too are a supporter. And I admire everything you've actually done, because you're impacting lives in a huge way.
So thank you for that being your final notes. And those who are watching this, you'll probably observe there's me wanting David to perhaps say a final few words about things he's got going on in his world, and being a true supporter, he's shining the light on me. And so that kind of wraps up the supporter needing the supporter. So if you are somebody that's really good at shining the light on other people, you're really good at supporting others, then sometimes you have to ask yourself that question: what kind of resource or support do I need? So without any further ado, I'm going to say thank you to you now, Dave. I'm going to take you out to the studio. I'm just going to close the show, and I'll come back to you and speak to you shortly. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So we come to that part of the show now where you know that in the modern world of the age of information, you can spend loads of time listening to podcasts, watching videos, reading books, etc., about everybody else's wisdom. And there is some great wisdom out there. But if you don't blend that with your own wisdom and actually think about what have I learned now, having spent that time, you can just end up filling your head with loads of stuff consciously and unconsciously, which can lead to overwhelm and frustration. So having listened to David and I today talking about push and support, what do you know now? Just take a moment to think about what have you learned as a result of listening, and what difference does knowing that make? What are you going to do with this information? And then those of you who are familiar with the show, you know we do a clean setup, which is a set of 3 questions to set you up for success for this week. So now that you know what you know, I want you to think about what would you like to have happen? It's the 23rd of May, 2022. What would you like to have happen? And just notice as you think about the answer, write the answer down. Are you talking about what you want? Is it outcome focused? Is it talking about problem, what you don't want? Is it talking about what I would call, and it probably won't relate to you guys, but remedy? So it's something that you want less of, or something you want to get away from. So if you're talking about what you don't want, or the remedy, things you want less of, you might want to ask yourself, so when you don't have it, or when you have less of it, then what happens? It's much easier for you to get support and to support yourself when you're talking about outcome rather than what you don't want. But as David really kindly articulated his process, how he learns from the lessons, he writes all the negatives down, and then he gets the positives. So you might have to put down what you don't want. That part of you, your system might need that part heard first. So you honor it, you hear it, and then you find out, or given that's what you don't want, what would you like to have happen? Or when you don't have that, then what happens? So get your outcome first. And once you know what you want, think about, how do you need to be? What kind of you is that you that could make that happen? Get curious, are you talking about yourself again from a sort of your strengths and positive, or are you criticizing yourself? So if you're talking about how you don't want to be or how you shouldn't be, again, so when you're not being that, then what happens? So you might be, I know some of the things like, I need to be less irritable or less frustrated with people. So when you're being less irritable and less frustrating, then what happens? So you might be more patient. You might be more persistent, whatever the words are for you. But again, it's outcome focus. It's what's working. So how do you need to be? What kind of you is that you? So once you have clarity of how you need to be and what you want, take a moment and think about what kind of resource and support might you need. It's a question that we quite often, particularly as supporters of others, we might be able to see the help they need, but we often perhaps lose sight of the support that we need. And that resource and support might be just a moment to think. It might be a pen and paper, a glass of water, something to eat. It might be someone to listen and ask questions. It could be a cheerleader at the end of that last mile on your marathon. Because somebody to cook your dinner tonight, or it could be a mentor, somebody like David, who's been in the construction business. For me, I'd like to have some teeth today. That's the resource support I need. So David, who's been in the construction business, who has a real passion to help other people, who has been through processes that felt icky, who is really good at honoring and finding out what your core values are. You know, maybe that's the kind of resource and support you need. If you're in the construction business and you need a business mentor that's going to help you, particularly, I know he's really keen to help people with those sort of exit strategies and actually developing and growing the business so they can have a better quality of life, perhaps having worked very long hours in the past. That might be the kind of resource and support you need. But you might just need your husband to do the dishes or the kids to clean up their pile of washing, whatever it might be. But have a think about today for this week. What kind of resource support might you need? And as that brings us on to the 45 minutes, I'm going to love you and leave you today. That is it for this week, and I'll see you next week with our next guest.